is too bad. Sorry. Are y'all ready for vacation yet?
No.
No? Fine. All right. Just in case you missed it, next week is Easter weekend, so we will not have Sunday class. So I know a couple people will be missing the last week, week 12, because they're taking me to Alaska, which means the rest of you will be missing it too. No. The week 12 will be the summary class to it, and for those of you that are missing, or if you're missing a class, let me know in advance. I'll try to get the notes to you ahead of time. I have some requests of those that had missed other classes, so if you are missing a set of notes, let me know which one it is. I have the 6 DVDs over there, and we're getting the last 2 made up currently, so you can kind of see the order, so you can see what you're missing if there are any notes that you're currently lacking.
What week are we in today?
We are week 8.
Thank you, Ben. I got some time.
Week 8. I did 6 over there. Week 7 would have been Beyond the Flood. Week 8 was the Ice Age. No, Beyond the Flood, then Ice Age. This is the Origin of Life. So this is week 8. Or 9. I don't know. Hold on. This is week 9. Yes.
Yes, it is.
Week 9. There's 6 over there. I have 2 DVDs that are currently being produced, which are the last 2 we did. So that would be the Ice Age, and then the Flood are currently being produced. This is week 9, the Origin of Life. So yes, there we go.
I need time to wait.
Okay. Those are the other 2 that are over there right now. This is week 9. So 8 and 7 are over there currently. The week. So, yeah. All right. Any other questions? Now that we've got ourselves totally confused. Brian's using his piggies and his fingers over here counting. Just making sure. Okay. John chapter 1 starts off with, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended not. He was in the beginning. As we were talking about at the very beginning, we started this class. Creation evangelism is the fundamental way of reaching the lost world today. It gives them a starting place of why to believe in the gospel, and that's what John's talking about. You have to believe in Christ the Creator before you can believe in Christ the Redeemer, Christ the Savior. Otherwise, you don't have a foundation and everything is just on a slippery slope and it can fall apart. Drop of a hat. So this week we're going to go into the origin of life, evidence for creation. Talk about some of the experiments that are touted in biology books that prove, quote unquote, that we have produced life, that we have created life in a test tube or in a laboratory, showing that it is not science but faith. That what we have proven for 30 years is a hoax is now being put back in the biology textbooks as the truth, yet again. Let's wait, turn that on. So some of the topics we're going to talk about is the issue at hand. The attempts to create life. The primordial soup, which is what they said life came from as the earth was being formed. The second law of thermodynamics. Take a very complicated topic and make it really, really easy. It's the only way I can understand it. And then the information and complexity and what that means. Most of this presentation came from a gentleman by the name of Mike Riddle, who now works for Answers in Genesis. Before that, he worked for his own ministry called Truth to Equip. And this is the book that most of it comes from, is The Origin of Life Equipping Course. He created it as a workbook for teens, and it's still available through his site as well as through Answers in Genesis, just to give them a more clear-cut understanding. So, Franklin Harold says that life arose here on Earth from inanimate matter by some kind of evolutionary process about 4 billion years ago. First off, he goes on and says this statement is of this is not a statement, of demonstrable fact, but an assumption. Almost universally shared by specialists as well as scientists in general. It is not supported by any direct evidence, nor is it likely to be, but it is consistent with what evidence we do have. Not a statement of demonstrable fact, but an assumption, then he reverses his decision and says it supports the evidence we have. That's a complete backward forward. Yes, exactly. And he, if you notice, is a professor of biochemistry, molecular biology at Colorado State University. This is what they start being taught in college. And if the professors learn to switch it up and change their talk and rationale as they're preaching it, the kids just kind of go, okay, sure. They write the notes down as quick as they can. What this violates, though, is the very first naturalistic law that says the law of biogenesis. Life only comes from what? Life. His first statement, though, is life arose from an inanimate matter. So if I threw this water bottle down and waited enough time, something could grow out of it. It's a natural... Okay, mold, maybe. Well, that's from the organisms that are already present on the bottle, correct? Didn't come from the inanimate matter. It came from the bioorganisms that are already on the plastic itself. So inanimate matter cannot produce life. It's a natural law, and we say it's a natural law because nothing has ever been seen to contradict it. We've never sat there long enough and watched a desk turn into a duck and waddle off. Never. So scientists know it's a natural law. We move on. What's the issue? What does the model of evolution say? That 4.6 years ago, or billion years ago, the Earth formed. Chemicals formed in the primordial soup. Chemicals bonded together to form molecules. Molecules bonded together to make a living cell. So what they say is that given enough time, plus enough chance, we can get life. And I want you to notice that every lesson we've done has focused on what? The matter of time. If we give it long enough, it'll happen. And they accept this on faith because nobody's going to ever live long enough to see it happen. And nobody was alive in the past, 4.6 billion years ago, to witness it happen. So if they keep touting the evidence and saying, given enough time, that's why all the dating methods have to show millions or billions of years old. That's why the Ice Age has been billions of years. That's why the flood that happened on Mars was billions of years ago. Everything has to have that time. Because we said with the dating game, that if there wasn't enough time, evolution could not have what? Happened. It could not have happened without that amount of time. So if we show that it's only been 1,000 years, or even 100,000 years, evolution couldn't have happened. What does the model of creation say? Colossians 1:16, for by him were all things created. How many things? All. That are in heaven, that are on earth, visible, invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him. He did it for him. A lot of people say, well, why are we here? Colossians tells us for him. Didn't have to do it, but we're here for him. And he created all things. And as we said before, that all means all. We said in Noah's flood, when he killed, it says the flood's waters covered all the earth to kill all things. All always means all. So anything living or not living, rocks and so forth, were created by God. So a couple of terms we're going to come across today. Atoms, basic unit of matter. If you're not good at science, you're going to just kind of nod off here. If my pointer doesn't work, so will I. Molecules, specific arrangement of atoms. Then we have amino acids, specific arrangement of molecules. Proteins, specific arrangements of amino acids. You'll notice that all these build on each other. First the atoms, then the molecules, amino acids, and then we get down into proteins. Amino acids are the basic building block of life. When anybody moving forward in the science laboratory, they are trying to prove that life can be created, they're trying to create amino acids. That's what happened back in 1953 with Mr. Stanley and Mr. Miller and Urey. They started doing this experiment, and what they started with were water vapors down over here, thinking that all life comes from water, as they've been taught in evolutionary class. They had an input chamber here. They just started filling it with different molecules, seeing what would take hold. Here they had a spark, which is supposed to represent lightning in the early Earth days. And then eventually they got life down here and they trapped it away from the water. Sounds really sophisticated. Sounds like it worked. Because in the science textbooks, what they say is they created life. They created amino acids, as well as a bunch of other junk. But they created amino acids. Therefore, they created life. What the textbooks say is as the gases circulated in the chamber, sparks representing lightning supplied energy to drive chemical reactions, and the experiment generated organic compounds, including amino acids, the building blocks to proteins. This is what the Modern Biology book said as of 1993. And if you have any kids that are in 9th grade biology, ask them. I guarantee this picture, at least, is still in there if the description has been removed. The bad part of this, though, is the amino acids for life. You have two types, right-handed, left-handed. Anybody in here left-handed? You're going to like this part. To build life, to go for the proteins, only the left-handed amino acids are used. The right-handed are junk. They're not used at all. So to create a protein, you have to have a string of only left-handed amino acids. That's creating life. Did he create that? He created about a 50-50 shot of right-handed and left-handed that just started connecting any random which way. Much like a word jumble. Doesn't make sense unless it's spelled out. It's kind of what he was getting. The second problem is he assumed with this that there was no oxygen. So he pulled all the oxygen out of the chamber so the amino acids could form. Because what we find out later on is that oxygen is detrimental to the amino acids being formed. They can't form with the oxygen and they can't form without it. And take that one. If there's a lot of oxygen in the atmosphere, all that lightning would have combusted with it. Would have basically erratized the amino acids. They couldn't have survived at all. But then, without it, they also couldn't have formed. So we go on. Two things to realize, it says. There we go. Maybe my battery is dying. It says, how did he know what the gases were? Was he there? This should be an easy question, guys. Come on. No. Okay, thank you. I thought I was tired. Were the amino acids the right type? And we just answered that. No, they were not. What evolutionists used, though, when they touted, is that the early Earth's atmosphere did not contain oxygen. Is there any scientific evidence to support this claim? Absolutely not. Every rock that's been tested that is supposedly laid down when the Earth formed have had oxygen in them. They can test it, they can pull out the ground, they can test it for what it contained, and there's always been oxygen present. If anything, they said, it was more oxygen-rich in the past than it is today. So if he pulled out all of the oxygen to form the amino acids, was he with the right conclusion? No. And you see, somebody's giving a little, all right, if I ask you to shout it out. Come on. New evidence says that geologists know from their analysis of the oldest known rocks the oxygen level in the early atmosphere had to be much higher than previously calculated. Harry Clemmy says, possibly, hey, what? Let's just do it this way. There's no scientific proof that Earth ever had a non-oxygen atmosphere, such as evolutionists require. Peter Ward, PhD in geology, says something. There. Oxygen is a poisonous gas and oxidizes organic and inorganic materials on the planetary surface. It is quite lethal to organisms that have not evolved protection against it. Meaning, if there's oxygen out there, it's poisonous to any new life until they have developed protection against it. So if life was just formed, these amino acids were just being formed, had they developed any kind of protection from the oxidation? No. What would have happened? They would have died. Could they have ever formed a protein? No. Without a protein, do we have life? No. So what they go on to say is that life cannot start with oxygen in the atmosphere, and it cannot start without life in the atmosphere. So what they've just said is it cannot form on its own. No natural process can form that amino acids. So what they started to do, and this is the new theory you hear about out there, is did it form in the ocean? Because what they start to think, or they start to claim, is that the oxygen wouldn't have been, or the water wouldn't have been as rich in the oxygen. So that's why you hear that life is dependent upon the water, that we were first fish and we crawled out of the water. This is what popularized that theory, that we started there and slowly crawled out, as you can see. We've already covered this. Over 2,000 types of amino acids that are out there. Only how many are used for life? 20. Which means it has to be very specific to what is being combined. Can we just take random stuff and put it together and make life? Can we make amino acids? We can make right and left-handed. Doesn't mean they're going to form life, though, does it? We go on. It says, since Miller's beginning picture of a pond full of dissolved amino acids under a reducing atmosphere has been discredited. I just like the adjectives they use. As a fourth grade teacher, it just really makes my heart pitter-patter. A new picture has come to take its place. A new picture has life originating in a hot, deep, dark, little hole in the ocean floor. Does that make us sound very sophisticated? Not at all. It makes it sound like we were slime, which is how you hear the term slime out of the primordial soup. That we, as intelligent as we are, started off as nothing else but down in a deep hole in the ocean floor and slowly crawled our way out, developed legs, and walked onto land eventually, is what they want you to believe. John Joe McFadden said something irrelevant. I have the batteries. It's just, remember when I had the control problem before? It decided to reactivate itself this weekend. The second limitation of Miller's experiments was that it obtained no polymers of amino acids, no peptides of proteins, meaning it didn't have anything that could actually join those chemicals together in order to make life. You just like that word, don't you?
Strong.
So, now we have a gentleman, William Bonner, that goes on and says that terrestrial explanations are impotent and non-viable. And what he says is that extraterrestrial life is where life originated from our planet. But does that solve the problem? Solves how it got here, but does that solve how it started? So what the evolutionists have started to do is saying, they started, since we can't figure out how life originated or how life formed, we'll make it up. We'll say that aliens brought life here as they were building the pyramids, started new life, we are here, but they never said, okay, fine, how did it evolve on alien worlds? They just try to shove the problem somewhere else. And this is an actual theory that is out there today. They are trying to make it as popular as you can. That's why projects like SETI are they're gaining ground so quickly. And what SETI is, if you don't know, it's people who do the NOVA program. They have a free download you can use on your computer, and it sends out radio signals into outer space. And it's free download, and your computer just monitors it. And there are millions, if not billions, of people using this program at home. And they've been doing it since about 1967. And it just sends out signals. And they're monitoring your signals eventually. And when you get something from space, it alerts you, and you contact SETI, and they look at it. Since 1967, you know how many weird signals they've gotten? 0. Millions of computers across the globe today are sending this signal out for free because they think there's life out there and we came from it. Then they say that's what started the pyramids. Talking about the proteins. And I figured I had some downtime, you can have it too. There are over 200,000 different proteins in your body. And the amino acids form the proteins. Michael Denton says, if a cell were magnified 1,000 million times in every direction we looked, we would see all sorts of robot-like machines. We would notice the simplest of the functional components of a cell, the protein, the molecules, were astonishing complex pieces of molecular machinery, each one consisting of about 3,000 individual atoms, arranged in a highly organized configuration. The task of designing even one such molecular machine that is a single functioning protein would be completely beyond our capacity. One, and your body has over 200 200,000 of them. Move on a little bit further. Talking about the amino acids coming together. There's 287 left-handed amino acids that form one protein. Now, if just one of those 287 were taken out of order or misplaced in some way, the whole thing falls apart. Just one. 287, all left-handed in a row, form one amino acid, or one protein. We have 200,000 proteins. I'm trying to get you to think about how impossible this scenario can even be. John Horgan says about the DNA molecule, says the DNA cannot do its work, including forming more DNA, without the help of proteins. In short, proteins cannot form without DNA, but neither can DNA form without proteins. So the DNA, to replicate itself, to make more DNA, has to have proteins. It can't do its job without proteins, and proteins can't form without the DNA. So again, it's a catch-22. Without both of them being there simultaneously, they never could have evolved. And that leads us to the chicken or the egg syndrome. That's exactly what the article says beyond that. Which came first? That leads us into Michael Behe. All of these are intelligent design components, but the science behind it is valid. Michael Behe says everything is irreducibly complex, meaning he takes the simplest machine, which is a mousetrap. Evolution says that each step is made in succession, meaning something works really, really well, and then evolution makes it better. And then evolution makes it better, one step at a time, millions of years apart. So he takes a mousetrap, and if he has a mousetrap, just a platform, no spring or hammer or catcher on it, just a platform, is it going to catch a mouse?
No.
What would you do with it if it didn't work? Throw it out. That's what your body would have done. Thrown it out. If I added the spring to the platform, would I catch a mouse? Well, that's one step. So again, it still wouldn't have worked. If I added the platform, the spring, and the latch, though, but I didn't have the hammer to hold it, would it still work? No. What does it need to work? All of its components at one time, or it never would have functioned. If you're looking at this right, to make the proteins, you have to have the amino acids, but you also have to have the DNA. To have the DNA, though, you have to have that protein, which requires the... It's just big circle. They all had to be there when? At the very beginning. It says the odds of just one protein forming with all of those stereotypes could be compared to flipping a coin and getting heads 287 times in a row. And we're going to move into that slide here in a moment. I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. Here is one cell. All of these parts, your body is made up of billions and billions of cells. Each cell contains numerous parts that all have to work what? Together. Irreducibly complex. The most complex organism of your body, and there are billions of them. Without each of these fine little motors or robots, the cell would never work. Next week, or not next week, but next time we meet, I'll have a video clip that shows the small little flagellum motor on the back of one of these, like a motorboat, but more specialized than any outboard motor, that's for the fishermen out there, we'll have seen. It can turn on a dime, yet it's more complex than the finest computers out there. And we never would look at this computer and say, it happened by chance, would we? This one, possibly, because it's always breaking. So we compare it to a 747. 4.5 million non-flying parts. Pretty impressive. But if we look at a cell next to it, possibly, or if you look at your hand out ahead of time, because it's over backwards on me again, there are over how many? 1 billion non-living parts in a cell. See, Brian folded his up already. He thought I was going to do it. Yeah, I'll keep working this. I'll just keep talking as I'm working. Boeing 747, 4.5 million non-living parts. Yet a cell has billions of non-living parts. Yet we, again, never would look at that airplane and go, it just happened. Now, with the way some of your pilots work, and if you're flying JetBlue, you might think that. It just kind of happened by chance. There we go. Billions of non... There we go. So the probability of life. If I flip a coin And we all do this to start basketball games off and so forth. We all like to do it. What are my chances of getting one head in a row?
1 and 2.
1 and 2. What about 2 in a row? 1 and 4. 3 in a row. 1 and 8. See, I got some math people back there. 8 heads in a row. 1 and 256. Okay, remember what I said about the protein? Just getting one protein was like getting a head, flipping that coin and getting heads up 287 times in a row. 100 heads in a row would be 10 to the 30th power. To get 287 heads in a row, the chances of getting one protein by chance would be 10 to 124th power. Statisticians claim, and most scientists agree, that anything above 50th power is an impossibility. It could never happen on its own. It could never happen, period. That's just 100 times in a row. 287 is what we said are actually the chances of getting one protein. And how many proteins did I say were in your body? 200, 200,000? What are the odds of that happening? So the law of probability states 10 to the 50th. A single protein, 10 to 191st. A single cell, 10 to the 400 or 40,000. So what are the odds? A lot of times, I didn't animate that one right, we'll just leave it up there. One thing evolutionists, when I was in school at least, and I don't know if it's popular now, they always said that given enough time, a monkey could type out the Encyclopedia Britannica. One monkey. Okay? So a gentleman went by and did the research for it and said, let's see what the odds of that are. He states, the probability of a monkey typing just the letter E in the title Encyclopedia Britannica would be 1 in 39. It's 39 keys on a typewriter. The odds of getting an E followed by an N is 1 to the 39 times 1 to the 39. The odds of a monkey getting just the title Encyclopedia Britannica correct one time is 10, 1/10 to the power of 36. And what that is saying, it goes on, is that if we took the Earth at 15 billion years old, like they say the universe is, and we gave a lot of really, really happy, proactive monkeys that just liked to work really, really hard, and they were persistent, and they made one attempt every second for the entire assumed age of the universe, 15 billion years, it would still require that many monkeys. 15 billion years, which is essentially saying the Earth would be filled with monkeys 1 mile deep. And one of them might get the title Encyclopedia Britannica correct. One of them in 15 billion years, a mile deep of monkeys. That'd be a whole lot of monkey stuff. Who's ever been to the zoo and watched the monkeys throw stuff? Think about that many of them. There are no chance of that happening. Francis Crick went on and said that if a particular amino acid sequence was selected by chance, how rare of an event this would be. The great majority of sequences can never have been synthesized at all, at any time. Robert Grange, PhD, research scientist, goes on, says the likelihood of life having occurred through a chemical accident is, for all intents and purposes, 0. So we've gone through the chemistry, we've talked about the biology, which is the amino acids. Now we need to get into the second law of thermodynamics. Who's ready for that fun cake? I'm not, apparently. Oh, well, I remember. Any questions so far? Second law of thermodynamics. When I first heard this theory, or this law, natural law, again, we know it's proven, I was confused beyond belief. So if you are, don't feel bad. It says energy goes from a state of usable energy to a state of less usable energy in an isolated system. What that means for physics for dummies like me. Have you ever wondered why the paint doesn't stay shiny on your car for over 5 years? Have you ever wondered why every blender you buy eventually breaks down in 3 or 4? Have you ever wondered why computers tend to break down rapidly, more and more? Have you ever wondered why you just can't jog like you used to without your knees hurting? The reason is the second law of thermodynamics says that everything is wearing down. Everything breaks. Meaning, nothing's getting better. I can't leave my car parked out there for 10 years, come back and it look better than it did the day I left it. Second law of thermodynamics says it's going to wear down. It's going to look worse when I come back to it. So we go from complexity to decay. But what does evolution say? It says that we go from nothing and it just keeps getting better and better and better if we give it enough time. 4 things that we need to think about that are detrimental to the origin of life. What was the first one? That we cannot have in the atmosphere. Oxygen. You guys are good. My computer is not. You're right, oxygen. Second thing, give it enough time. I'm hating this computer right now. Go ahead, Brian. What is the second one?
Second law of thermodynamics.
Second law of thermodynamics. If we give it enough time, like evolutionists say, is it going to get better? No, it's going to get worse. Then it talks about water. We know that life didn't come from water. Where did God say that life started? Thank you.
Dust.
And then finally, the design of the amino acids. Because we said that they are irreducibly complex for them to join together, for them to make anything. Essentially, let me put it this way with the amino acids. I like to keep going back to it. Does my name make sense if I spelled it V-N-S-T-E? No. Would you understand even what I'm talking about? No. Half the time you don't understand what I'm talking about anyway. I can put a random string of amino acids together, even if they're all left-handed. Doesn't mean they're going to form a protein. The fact is they are irreducibly complex to do their job. They were designed to do their job the very first day, when God said, in the beginning. From that start, they've always done their job right. In 1859, Charles Darwin came up with this evolutionary model. And I don't know if you know how he came up with it. It wasn't just the finches. First, he went off to the Galapagos Islands. He thought he was a Christian. Started looking at these finches. They all had different beak sizes. And he went, well, you know what? Given enough time, those beaks are changing. So he started formulating this idea. He didn't really say anything. On their way back, they kind of cruised by South America, and he saw this river that had flown down. It was in a valley. And he came up with this idea that must have taken a long time to cut through all that rock. Much like the Grand Canyon would have, if we saw it. He looks at it and goes, that must have taken an enormous amount of time. Finches, time. That's where his whole theory came together. That if we have enough time, things will change. Matter and energy. Given enough time, everything can change. But if we look at the global flood, gives us an explanation for that valley he was seeing with that river. He was leaving behind his what? His Christian roots. He was raised in the church. He left it behind because he saw a river going through a valley, and he saw some birds that have different beaks. That's all it took. So how much easier is it for your kids and teens to leave behind their Christian roots, given today's media and sources of information telling them not how he came up with his theory, but that his theory has been proven true time and time again. As Christians or creation model, we understand one important thing. Sure, matter, energy, time. But what about an outside intelligence? Who would that outside intelligence be? God. We have a starting point. And as awkward as it sounds when you're talking to somebody, the law of cause and effect, for every cause there is an effect. We talk about that in astronomy. What is our ultimate cause? God. Now some people will say, well, that's supernatural. You can't just have God. Sure I can. What's your cause? And they'll say, well, at least I have an answer to what my cause is. Because they're both a matter of faith. Oh, you little... Better break this computer today. Go on to the next slide in your handout. Werner Gitt says, since the findings of James D. Watson and Francis H. Crick, it was increasingly realized by contemporary researchers that the information residing in the cells is of crucial importance to the existence of life. See, now I see all the handouts being turned and flipped. I apologize for my computer today, guys. Satan really just doesn't want you to learn this today. Goes on, says, anybody who wants to make meaningful statements about the origin of life would be forced to explain how the information originated. All evolutionary views are fundamentally unable to answer this crucial question. They don't know. Very first slide said what? It's assumed. There's no facts to back it up. We think it's this way. Okay. We're going to skip forward a little bit and go down to where it's Origin of Life by John Joe McFadden. The simplest living cell could not have arisen by chance. He's an evolutionist. One. He's also a professor of molecular biology and quantum physics. Do we call him ignorant because he goes against the theory? His peers do. Because he went against the popular theory, he was almost kicked out of college or out of his university. Because he went against Darwin's theory. And he said, it couldn't have happened. There's no way on Earth it could have happened. And there's no way this computer wants to work. Franklin and Harold goes on and says, the origin of life is also a stubborn problem with no solution in sight. Meaning they cannot foresee anything. They've gone through every experiment they can. Were they able to create it in life? Or create life in the lab, in the test tubes? No. Guess how many times they have been trying? Basically every year. Haven't you ever heard that, they're always trying to create life in the test tube, and that's where the new embryonic stem cell research goes into, because they think that if they can start with that life, then they can create life. But have they answered the question of where the origin of life came from? No. Because it's already coded with the information. Going back to the second law of thermodynamics, one of the biggest arguments against that evolutionists will use is they'll say, what do you mean we can't go from simple to complex? What about an acorn? What about an embryo? It goes from a baby, starts with the cell, the egg, and it grows into an embryo, a fetus, and it grows into a person, into an adult. That's getting much more complex, isn't it? What about an acorn? Small little seed planted in the ground, grows into what? A mighty oak tree. And the first time I heard that from an evolutionist, I went, okay. But one oversight skipped me. That acorn has all the genetic information in it already. The DNA is already in the egg. And the sperm, as they hit, it's already there. What evolutionists are trying to answer by these questions is, where did that information come from? And they can't. So if you look at that circular reasoning, they're saying, well, if it starts in the acorn and grows, that's getting more complex. We've just proven that law of thermodynamics doesn't really disprove evolution. And it actually does. Dr. Klaus Dose, Origin of Life, in his book, says that more than 30 years of experimentation on the origin of life in the fields of chemical and molecular evolution have led to a better perception of the immensity of the problem of the origin of life on Earth, rather than its solution. The chances that life just occurred are about as likely as a typhoon blowing through a junkyard and constructing a Boeing 747. That goes back to the whole idea of the monkey type in the Encyclopedia Britannica. A cell is more complex than the entire Encyclopedia Britannica. Yet just to do that one title was nearly impossible. Actually was impossible. Paul Davies, who I use quite a bit, PhD in physics, says that many investigators feel uneasy about stating in public that the origin of life is a mystery. Even though behind closed doors, they freely admit they are baffled. They worry that a frank admission of ignorance will undermine funding. And we've seen this over and over and over again in the debate of evolution. Currently, there's getting ready to be a Darwin Design Conference at SMU. And the SMU professors are up in arms, the anthropology, the archaeology, all the liberal arts, because how dare something like this come to their university and question Darwin's theory. And they're picketing, they're raising signs, marching in the streets, all for free speech. They won't even allow an exchange of ideas to go back and forth. If you're not familiar with what this conference is you have a spokesperson for evolution, you have a spokesperson for creation, or in this case, intelligent design. And they go back and forth in a political debate style forum. It's like ruling out a presidential debate because they have differing ideas. Which sometimes we should probably do that, but that's another story. We've seen professors that aren't tenured get fired from the universities for mentioning weaknesses to the theory of evolution in class. Just recently, there was a substitute teacher that was working at a school, I want to say up in Oregon, and he was kind of a long-term sub there. And he started getting materials from Answer in Genesis, things biology related, and he took out every bit of creation, God, anything that would relate to that. And he left just the facts in the article. And the article's online, so you can even read it and confirm. Where he made the mistake was he left the name at the end, Ken Ham, at the end. And what happened was, this notice went home and somebody recognized that name from the Creation Museum they're getting ready to open, and went, oh, that's a creationist. The school board went up in arms that he was presenting creationist literature to the class, and all he was doing was showing differing scientific views to the common theory. And he was fired from the job. The school district fired him without pay, never to be hired again, and it's all over the paper. So what are the odds of him getting any public education job? None. And he didn't even talk creation or evolution. He was just saying, here are some different ideas to look at. Because, if you could see one of the last slides, it says, if I tell you only part of the evidence and you believe it, you've not been taught, you've been indoctrinated. However, if I tell you all the evidence and you make a decision, then you've been taught. There's no way to present just one side of the story. You have to present both sides, all of the facts. Or it's just what I believe at that point. Conclusion. The origin of life by natural processes. Evolution is not possible. All left-handed amino acids. There's not enough time. Life is too complex. We're all looking at the same evidence. So how do we come up with these differing views? Neither evolution nor creation can be proven scientifically. It's all a matter of faith. In my opinion, do we have more evidence to back up creation? Yes, I do. Am I a little biased? Probably. But I used to be an evolutionist for a majority of my life. And especially after I got my master's and my bachelor's, I was a die-hard evolutionist and would debate with anybody about it. So I can look at it objectively and say, you know, you're not taught this in college, in anthropology or archaeology, or even geology that I got to see in. But I'm not bitter. It's your choice which model to believe. And to close the class off, leave you with a parable, much like Jesus did, because it was the best way to communicate an idea. It says, in an isolated jungle lived a tribe of primitive people with no knowledge of the world outside their village. They had never been in contact with any modern technology or lived in constant struggle with other tribes. One day, as members of the tribe were hunting in unknown territory, they stumbled upon the wreckage of a crashed plane. Approaching the plane with caution, they touched the metal surface and ran their hands over the smooth glass of the cockpit window. As they ran back to the village to report the find to the village elders, many questions ran through their minds. Where could this huge structure have come from? A debate over the origin of this strange object soon raged. Had the god sent it to them as a sign? The village polarized into opposing viewpoints. One opinion was that the object was built by humans. After all, the skeletal remains of several humans were found within the decaying structure. Others believed the object must have had a natural origin. To believe it was created by other humans would acknowledge an intelligence surpassing their own. Those believing that the airplane was designed and built by other intelligent humans argued that this was obvious, but could not prove how, why, or when. All attempts to explain how, why, or when, which were not based on a belief in random natural processes, were severely ridiculed. The tribe elders believed that all of the knowledge needed to explain the world around them was in the possession of their tribal council, and any attempt to persuade them otherwise was met with severe punishment. The first group soon became silent. Those believing in the natural origin of the object strengthened their argument by showing that the same rubber-like substance found in the tires could be found oozing from trees. Likewise, a substance similar to the glass could be found on the beaches when lightning had struck the sand. The paint and fluids in the structure could also be shown to occur naturally. By throwing one of the screws into the air with just the right spinning motion and catching it just the right hole, the screw would even spin partially into place. All amongst themselves they agreed, given enough time, the structure could have built itself, although the exact mechanism was not yet known. Even more convincing evidence was forthcoming as the deteriorating plane was repaired and the parts rearranged. Since the natives eventually understood so much about the structure, this was accepted as proof the plane had built itself. A project was even started to map, catalog, and understand every piece of the structure. All of these observations confirmed to the primitive natives that they had been correct in their understanding of the natural origin of the object. Those stubborn few who continued to believe the object was created by other intelligent people were considered backward and ignorant. They were ignored, and village schools were organized so that all the children would be taught only the naturalistic, scientific explanation. And within several generations, there was no longer any dissension because everyone now knew that random processes had produced the wrecked airplane. So the mystery was solved until the builder came back. Just want to try one more time. So, life could not have arisen by chance. It was designed to do what it does do, and what it does do well, till we wear down. All of that caused from sin. Romans 8 says all of the earth groans. Everything breaks down. The Bible confirms it. We used to live 900 years. Now we barely get to 80. We can see that in the genes. There's genetic flaws out there. Where out of 3 billion base pairs of genetic code, DNA, if one gets twisted around, you get the syndrome where you age 5 days for every night you sleep. By age 13, they're bald, arthritic. Most of them don't live beyond 13. One mutation out of 3 billion. So is it possible that when God said, I'm done with you past 120 years, no more, after Noah's flood, that He changed some of our genetic code? Absolutely. God can do what? All things. It's plausible and it's possible. If one mistake can kill you by the age of 13 and age you, it says 5 days while you slept. That affects 1 out of 6 million kids. He can tell us how long we're going to live. And with that, remember, we're off next week. We won't be here. You get a vacation and a break. I get to try to fix this horrible machine of mine. And then we will move into intelligent design and some of the falsified hoaxes out there, the false record that's out of sequence that we see, and then we'll get into the summary class at the end. So we've got 3 more to go. And that's it. With that, any questions? Books and DVDs over there. There's a prize list over there as well. I will be up here. Thank you. God bless. Have a good night.